Welcome, indigenous media viewers. Today, July 9th, marks the 10th anniversary of South Sudan independence. This day signifies hope for peace and economic development to many who have sacrificed their lives, some displaced in the refugee camps, others internally displaced in overcrowded camps. Despite high hopes among diverse communities who fought injustice, the country continues to face enormous challenges: inadequate infrastructures, that is, lack of roads, connecting villages and towns, poor institutional frameworks, proliferation of arms, and a high degree of fragility. The country remains highly polarized along ethnic lines, and the dream to promote a decentralized state structure has not been realized. It is still failing to compromise on power sharing, and little understanding as to how this could be achieved in the interest of peace, stability, and economic development. On this special day, I'm joined by two guests to talk us through the significance of this day to South Sudanese and the African continent in general. My guests are General Lemilo Moro and Ato Samuel Zawude Agos. Gentlemen, welcome to Indigenous Media Show. Well, I think before we could proceed to the day, let me play how the mood was 10 years ago.
नहीं यार ये तो दो लड़कियां नहीं है वो जाके देख करके आ रही है
Move to the wide line.
Gentlemen, that was the mood 10 years ago. Today, Juba is quiet. The president has cancelled the celebration of the independence, citing economic hardship, and yet blames the sanctions on the country and arms embargo. Let me begin with you, Lemi. What do you make of that? What is the mood today in the country and outside?
Thank you, Nikao, for this opportunity once again to share my own views about South Sudan. But first, yes, my name is Lemi Romuro. I am an army officer, but I'm also a security analyst. I am currently doing research on security and development here in the UK. This is for particularly for my colleague there, Samuel, who did not get my introduction earlier. Coming back to the mood in South Sudan, I think the mood is one of sorrow, one of unhappiness, one of despair, all because the dreams that people of South Sudan had in the past have not simply been realized. Those celebrations that you showed there happens to be an incident of that day, and it has never been repeated again. Because after those celebrations, only 2 years later on, South Sudan found itself back into war, serious war. That war occurred on the 15th of December 2013, when the country found itself again in a serious situation of war. War broke out within the SPLA leadership, and that war led to the death of not less than 500,000 lives. Some analysts have presented it as more than 400,000 dead. I don't think that is a correct figure, although they also do recognize that is an estimate. I believe more than that number of people have perished in the country in the last 6 years because of the war. So nobody is happy. There has never been any initiative for development. The little money that has been there has completely been squandered. Corruption is the highest level. So the country up to today has not been able to see an iota of fruits of their struggle. No single bridge has been built, no single school has been built, no single hospital has been built. As you indicated earlier, all villages are remain in their remote locations without connection. So there is nothing to celebrate about in South Sudan. In fact, some people are regretting the losses that were incurred for the liberation, because if people knew from the beginning that this is what liberation meant, I believe many would not have had the desire to be part of that liberation, because liberation has turned out to be a curse. It has not made any difference. People have died more than the people who died under the hands of the Arabs in the north. And so there's nothing good about it. That is what I can say as a part of introduction about the mood that is in country today.
Thank you, Lemi. Let me come back to you, August. Sorry, I'm Samuel. Uh, Basically, Gambela region you came from, has been hosting thousands and thousands or hundred thousands South Sudanese refugees. This particular day, you were in Gambela, and for some time also you worked for an organization that was caring and protecting for these South Sudanese refugees. How do you remember this specific day? What was the mood at that time for those refugees that you worked for or you worked with?
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Samuel, and I'm recently working as a researcher. Yeah, and I vividly remember the happiness and the euphoria in a different campus, and then South Sudan is celebrating and liberation, and most of them they went back to cast their vote uh, in the referendum. So I mean, many hoped that the referendum could bring peace, and it could help them to cast the shackles of poverty and the insecurity that resulted in displacement of money. Some of them they had been in a protracted displacement situation, and some of them living in a refugee camps. Many hoped that they could get the chance to go back to their country and then rebuild their livelihood and then start life in a new country with new hope. But the hope uh, dashed away after 2013, and the what is started in a kind of confrontation between the different groups. It degenerated into full-scale conflict, and then also the conflict took ethnic dimension, and the country has been engulfed in a insecurity and vicious cycle of conflict recently.
Thank you,
Back to you.
thank you,
Yeah.
Samuel. Well, gentlemen, I think South Sudan, in terms of independence, has been known for conflict, and conflict, it can be said, that is a hallmark of this new independent country in in Africa. As Lemi clearly said earlier on, shortly, after South Sudan became independent, the country descended into another conflict in 2013 and also later on 2016. This instability has had a serious impact on the civilians in the country, sending them out of the country as well as inside the country as internally displaced people. So, what is your view in terms of long promised independence of this country? Let me begin with you, Lemi.
Thank you once again, Nico. I think for as long as we have the current leadership, the same leadership that took the country back to war in 2013 in place. If they continue to be in charge of the country, I believe that it will be naive for me to assume that there will be peace in the country. If South Sudan is to get out of this current quagmire, then the only solution lies in a change of guard. If a new generation comes up to take over, perhaps maybe we will see a new line of development in the country. As it is now, there is no sign that there will be some serious changes in the country, because even the agreement that has been signed to try and stop this war still remains shaky, because the agreement ended up being a method of apportioning power among themselves without necessarily addressing the fundamental issues that took the country to war. For example, the issue of corruption, where the little money that the country got from the oil almost entirely ended up in the hands of those few who are in power. Because of that, there has never been any development that has taken place. Issues of insecurity because of tribal and ethnic politics that have come to be one of the guiding principles in the country. As a consequence, you see communities now fighting themselves. People are polarized. They are deeply divided among themselves. Many Southerners do no longer see themselves as sons and daughters of one country. And this is completely a development that has been brought about by the current leadership. The entire leadership that is in charge today is responsible for all these crises. And for as long as they remain in power, I do not have any hope that there will be something new that will come out of South Sudan. The communal fights will continue almost every day. At least between 10 and 20 people, South Sudanese die, whether this is in Bahar Ghazal or in Equatoria or in Upper Nile. And there is no plan, there is no any signal to show that this issue of communal fighting is going to be addressed. All the efforts that were made to disarm local populations has not worked, and it will never work for as long as the same leadership remains in place, because they disarm people, but in the night, the same guns are taken back and redistributed to the people, because each one wants to maintain their position in power. People now trade in militia creation. So everybody who wants to be a minister today, it is just a question of pulling together your own ethnic community, pulling together your tribe, declare yourself a rebel leader, and the next day you will be somebody in government. This has been the order of the day. As a consequence, we have close to more than 25 rebel groups. 25 rebel groups means there are 25 commanders in chief. There are 25 chiefs of staff. There are close to more than 3,000 generals in South Sudan. In fact, generals are likely to be almost more than the junior officers. So what kind of a country that has a hope can be in this way? No. So at my personal level, I don't think there can be any meaningful change. I mean, there can be any meaningful uh, change in this for as long as the status quo maintains itself in the place. Because if this leadership has not been able to do anything in almost 15 years, 16 years now, from 2005 up to today, then it will be wrong for anyone in his or her own right mind to think that the same leadership will miraculously come out with something new and change the situation. That will not happen. Because if they cannot do anything over these 16 years, then we don't expect them to be able to do anything at all. So my belief, and I am happy because many people share these beliefs, that the only remedy for South Sudan is for the current leadership to step aside and give chance to a new generation, give chance to different breed of people to try and put the country in order. But if they insist that they are the ones, then South Sudanese must be prepared to continue to suffer for as long as these people remain in power. That is my feeling.
Thank you, Leme.
Mm.
Let me come to you, Samuel. Conflict has brought or has taken much of efforts in Gambela region, where South Sudanese refugees live. You are aware that even as we speak, there are some, fear of insecurity from those people who cross the border into the Gambela region, abduct children, and also burn uh, civilian homes. What do you make of this conflict in general in terms of the independence of South Sudan since 2011?
Yeah, we have to see the two sides separately. One, I mean, the spillover effect of South Sudanese conflict. And when I say spillover effect of South Sudan's conflict, this ethnic dimension that this conflict is taking has been taking, and because we have also history of a colonial border, demarking, dividing the same ethnic group along these colonial borders into different states. We have South Sudanese Nuer, we have Ethiopian Nuer on the Ethiopian side. So whenever you have conflict among Nuer community, the trend of this conflict taking the spilling into Ethiopian territory is high. We have seen recently that the conflict between different clans, sections of Nuer living in South Sudan, also affected the stability and the relationship between the same ethnic group who are now in Ethiopia. These the borders is very porous, and ethnic ties are more stronger than the citizenship ties or border markers. So in this case, uh, we have been witnessing this kind of incidents now and then. We have also long history of conflict between the Anywa and the Nuer crossing the borders, and at the beginning of the 19th century, and it was like border crossing and mobility is based on reciprocity, and people used to peacefully coexist and then manage, and then those people who are looking for pasture, they cross the border and move to this area with the permission from the Anua community. For example, those who are looking for pasture, they cross to the territory of the Anua with permission and with reciprocity. But with the kind of the dynamics, one, the government of Ethiopia is begin to support this Pele movement, South Sudanese liberation movement, and then there's Pele soldiers. They had military bases in this Ethiopia, and then this created opportunities, mushrooming of assault rifle, and then in the hands of many civilians, and plus the Gambella itself loosely incorporated to the national government in terms of extending institutions, security institution to the region, and then protecting civilian in the region. So it's kind of so many dynamics affecting the stability of Gambella, and then creating fuel in the relationship. What after the mushroom of this assault rifle, what is used to be negotiated and settled, now people use guns, and then to resolve conflict, to resolve differences, and then to enforce their interest. And then you have this also this perennial cattle raiding. This is a kind of problems in the region, not only in Ethiopia but also in Kenya side. And there are people who want to to kind of restock their cattle by raiding the cattle of other. So this, needs kind of very well thought through strategy to resolve this kind of thing. The people who kind of are looking, and then this is the only way to facilitate transition to adulthood. They have to pay dowries, and then now because of the conflict, long protracted conflict in that area, they don't have any means to kind of have the required cattle to for dowry and all these things. And then they have a weapon, and then they have know-how to use this kind of gun machines, and they use this gun machine to raid the cattle of other people, especially they cross to Ethiopian side, and then raid and take some cattle to South Sudan side. So this also adds to the layers to the already existing conflict and instability, this vicious cycle of instability. So it is very difficult and complex situation, engulfing the whole area along this Gambela and South Sudan.
Do you have anything to say on that particular topic, particularly the effect of South Sudanese instability into the neighboring regions?
Actually, yes, Nikau. First of all, I agree with all the analysis of my colleague Samuel that the presence of the South Sudanese refugees in Gambela certainly has implications in many ways. It has implications on the security of the area. It has implications on the general development of the area. it has implications on communal relationship between different groups in the area. So indeed, the presence of the South Sudanese refugees, in my opinion, has not been a blessing to the Ethiopian people, particularly the Anuak people, the local people of the area, simply because these refugees, as Samuel had just alluded to, they come as groups, as communities, as clans, and because they have been fighting in South Sudan against one another, now moving to Ethiopia, then they carry the same fight, the same hatred, the same tribal problems that they had, then transferred to Ethiopia. That creates a lot of problems. Certainly, it is a serious issue, and I believe that because of this linkage, unfortunately, by refugees, the two governments of Ethiopia and government of South Sudan have big responsibility to see how they can resolve it. Particularly the government of Ethiopia. I don't trust the government in South Sudan to have any capacity to think of solving border issues or the refugees at the border, because South Sudanese are refugees even within the South Sudan. As we speak now, we have close to 4 million South Sudanese who are refugees within South Sudan. Even in Juba, which is supposed to be the capital of the country, it has become a host of refugee settlement camp. It is surrounded by refugee settlement camp in all these towns, whether this is Malakal, this is Bor, or in South Sudan. So what is happening in Gabela is not even being discussed in Juba, because people in Juba have more of their own problem than paying attention to what is happening at the borders. So it is a very serious issue, and I think the responsibility then lies on the Ethiopian government to see how these people can be. First of all, they must recognize that they are refugees, and that the reason that they have come there and they are now there as refugees is because of insecurity in their own countries. So they should be able to appreciate the relative peace, the acceptance by the local people to allow them to take refuge in their land. And if they cannot do that, if they cannot respect the local people, if they turn out to fight the local people and cause them problems, then definitely it will not be good. The Ethiopian government, they need to take charge of this situation and try to impose law and order in the area. Regarding the issue of weapons, that's very true. From 1983 up to today, the frequency of border crossing has become more and more common, because from the beginning of the war in 1983, South Sudanese have been coming and going into and out of Ethiopia. And in this process, a lot of interactions happen. But above all, they got weapons, and a lot of these weapons, just like Samuel said earlier, have found their way into the hands of the local people. So there are more weapons now in the Gambela region than they were before the war. Now, with this recent development, particularly this recent war of 2013, I believe must have brought more weapons than whatever weapons that went into the hands of the local people during the SPLA era. More weapons came in now because majority of the militia in Upper Nile region all found their way into Gambela. And they came with their weapons. And these weapons, some of which are sold now to the people. So they are there. That creates a serious problem. So it is the responsibility of the government in Ethiopia to see that people who have come as refugees should be refugees by definition. And if they have any information about availability of these weapons in the camp, then it is their responsibility to ensure that these weapons are collected and put in a safe place so that society can be able to live in peace. Otherwise, without serious government commitment in the area, I don't see when there will be stability in the Gambela area, at least for now.
Thank you, Lemi. As we are talking about the independence of South Sudan, there is something very peculiar that comes to surface, particularly accusation and counter-accusation among the South Sudanese politicians. In 1991, the late John Garang and Riek Machar found themselves in a similar situation as we also see today. So let me play this video and then you comment on that.
Who stabbed the movement in southern Sudan in the back. They will be known as people who, at the point of victory, when we were going to win, they stabbed us in the back.
In contrast to the rich Muslim north, southern Sudan is Christian and poor. John Garang from the Dinka tribe has led the rebel SPLA since it was founded in 1983. It's reduced the government to 3 strongholds in the south, the capital Juba, and the garrison towns of Wau and Malakal. The rebel split came last August. Riek Machar, formerly 4th in the High Command, accused Garang of being a dictator and set up on his own.
Like semblance of institutions, of structures, of democracy within the movement. He is interested in running the movement as his personal property.
A dawn parade of new recruits in Nasser.
I guess this video tells a lot about the accusation and counter-accusation. So the current level of accusation is historical. What do you say about that, Lemi? That is for you, Lemi.
Yes, Nikau, sorry. Unfortunately, that is the case. The culture of rebellion in South Sudan certainly started in 1991 by the same Riek Machar, who, in my opinion, is also responsible for the 2013 rebellion. And as we have heard from the words, and by the way, Dr. John made those statements precisely in May 1993 in Nairobi, when, and I was personally present because we were visiting Kenya from the field, and this was when there was the Abuja 2 his initiative was initiated. So that was when he made this statement in Nairobi, and I remember even the location properly. So yes, there is already an established culture of rebellion, and then and this culture is being perpetuated by mainly an individual in the name of Riek Machar, who thinks that he should be the one on the helm. Unfortunately, when he was accusing Dr. John of running the movement as a personal problem, but as we speak today, Riek Machar is fighting for his own personal status in government, because Riek wanted to maintain the position of the first vice president. Riek Machar took South Sudan back to war, and we ended up losing almost 500,000, almost 500,000 South Sudanese died because Riek wanted the position of the first vice president. And now in 2018, when they signed this agreement to bring him back as first vice president, Riek has done exactly what he was accusing Dr. John of. Riek has appointed his own wife as the Minister of Defense. Riek has appointed his own mother-in-law as the Minister of Health. Riek has appointed his own son-in-law as the Minister of Petroleum. Now, who is working for himself? Was it Dr. John that he was accusing, or himself, or Riek Machar? I think if blame was to be distributed, I want to believe that Riek Machar takes the bulk of the blame because of his desperation for his personal power aggrandizement. Because Riek wants to be the one to lead. He doesn't believe in anybody at all. Yes, he's accusing people, but the fact is that for those of us who know him, it is him actually who wants this power. Now, for the last 1 year he is in Juba, he has even abandoned his entire members of his group, the so-called SPLM-IO. He has abandoned everybody because he has secured his entire family into government, and now he's happy. So he does not talk. So the issue that he was raising, that he was accusing Dr. John of being working for himself, completely does not arise, because there is no way he will give a single example of Dr. John appointing his own people. First of all, we were not a government. We had no money in the bush. And then the SPLM at the time had everybody, not just South Sudanese, all the way to Nuba. People like late Yusuf Kouameki, people like Malik Agar in the Funj, people like Yasser Arman Said, people like Dr. to reacquire power in the South because he wants it for himself. So he has indeed gone down in history as somebody who is responsible for more than 1 million lives of South Sudanese. In 1991, in Upper Nile, in Bor alone, Riek killed close to 15,000 people. In a matter of weeks, he's matched this. In Nasser, he slaughtered hundreds and hundreds and thousands. Now, again in 2013, he has even done more harm to South Sudanese than before. So, who is he? In fact, Salva Kiir is responding. Kiir Mayardit is responding to Riek's own behavior. So, I believe that those who are responsible for recording history will put it as it is, so that it goes down in history as somebody who has always specialized in killing the South Sudanese simply because of his own ego for power.
Samuel, What do you make of this accusation and counter-accusation in terms of the progress South Sudanese want to make, economic development, improvement in infrastructures, and so forth?
Yeah, I want to see it from the broader regional perspective, because this kind of thing is repeating everywhere. For example, you remember the split between TPLF leaders in kind of 2001 or something within the Ethiopian government. One led by the former Prime Minister Malaz Zenawi, and then the others. And then recently also we have this split within the ruling coalition of Ethiopian ruling coalition. And you have this thing, the same trend in Eritrea between those who used to lead the liberation movement of Eritrean liberation movement, and then you have one group led by the president, the current president, and the other groups are now languishing in prison. And then the same in South Sudan, one of the root cause of the conflict in 2013 is the political wrangle between the group led by the Dr. Riek Machar and then the President Salva Kiir. So, I mean, the whole trend, the whole situation is boiled down to kind of finding real negotiated solutions, and they're focusing on building institutions that pave the way for, create a platform where all these nation and nationalities, they can negotiate, and on the few in the institutions that they want to build, and the political system that they want to create, and then pave the way for very negotiated settlement that can also facilitate an institutional building, election, and democratization process. In the absence of this, we have, like in Ethiopia and South Sudan, we have before the long time ago, before these different nations, they brought them together forcefully. They used to have their own system of administration. They used to have their own political organizations. They used to have their own mode of production, mode of livelihood. And when you have this kind of diversity, you need to create a platform where this a kind of system that can entertain and allow this diversified society to coexist peacefully. But the thing that we have is individuals, they want to instrumentalize and polarize the situation to advance their political agenda, to take power, to try to dismiss, try to annihilate anyone standing on the road, in their way of power. So if you are not creating a platform for negotiated settlement, and then kind of people collectively shape the future of their country, it is very difficult, and you keep on you just embroil the country into vicious cycle of conflict, vicious cycle of rivalry. I remember I heard this week the president of South Sudan speaking about the current peace agreement. And then he's saying that he is kind of characterizing the peace agreement as if it is kind of document handed out to them by the mediator rather than a kind of negotiated solution that address all the grievances and all the root cause of the conflict. And apart from the actors in South Sudan, you have these regional players, and the Horn of Africa has been in a kind of proxy war behind every movement, behind every conflict. You have neighboring countries sending their troops to their neighbors and then supporting one group over the other. So it is very difficult to stop the conflict by itself if you don't have these dynamics, the geopolitical dynamics into consideration, into account, in order to find a lasting solution. Solutions from from the grassroots level. We have been trying to impose and send a kind of solution which revolves around power sharing scheme rather than addressing the grievance of each stakeholders from a grassroots level. You need to listen to the people, to the grievance of all the people, and they involve every stakeholders, and then to come up with a very negotiated solution rather than you just impose your own what you think that could solve the problem. Especially this kind of people have been talking about power sharing scheme rather than addressing the root cause of the conflict. So if we are not moving to that kind of effort, it is very difficult to shape and then also to address the issue of this the political atmosphere that is shaped by accusation and political division.
Thank you, Samuel. We are still within that grand vision of SPLM. I think it seems that so much time has been spent on politicization rather than providing basic services to the South Sudanese society. Let's play probably to remind our viewers as to the vision of SPLM when Garang was talking in the bush at some point.
The guns and the bullets, that is military power, transforming military power into political power and using the political power to achieve socio-economic development rapidly, because there is no meaning of revolution unless it makes our people happy, unless the masses of our people as a result become prosperous. They go ahead, they advance, they get shelter, they get food, they get clean drinking water, they get education, they get health services. Unless we provide this to our people, unless the revolution provides this to our people, then the people would prefer a government of the NIF that provides salt to a government of the SPLA that does not provide salt. This is simple arithmetic. If the SPLA cannot deliver anything, and we just shout revolution, and the cattle.
What went wrong, Leme? There is that big grand.
First of all, I must give you a special thanks for that particular clip. That was December 19 91 in a place called Isoke in our revolutionary military school. And if you look at the picture closely, behind my head could not appear, but that was me sitting behind Dr. John, right behind him. So I'm happy that part of that history is recorded. Now a lot happened, and these lots are all wrong almost. One, first of all, we as a people were very unfortunate because we lost Dr. John, who was the progenitor of this vision. He only spent 21 days and he left us. He died. People claim he died accidentally in a plane crash. I am not sure whether this is true or not, but the fact is he's gone. And Dr. John is gone together with the vision. So that when we came in 2005 under Kir Mayardit, completely the whole thing was the reverse. Kir does not have an idea about development. He has never told the people, he has never told us about how he intends to develop South Sudan. And so what is happening is a total failure of the realization of the vision of the SPLM. And that vision is dead. It is dead with Dr. John, and there's no way it can be resuscitated. It is gone and gone for good. And that's the very unfortunate situation, because Salva Kiir has no idea of what should happen to the people and what development means. I'm not sure if he, apart from the feeling, apart from the belief that the revolution will make us independent from the Arabs, I think there's nothing beyond that in the thinking of Kir Mayardit, nothing else. So many things went wrong, beginning with the loss of the vision. As a consequence of that, a country without a vision for development is like an animal that has no head at all. It is like someone who is blind, because if there's no vision, then there is no ideology that should govern the country. As we speak today, the people of South Sudan have gone to a level where they don't actually regard themselves as people of a common destiny. People are now ethnicized. People are grouped into tribes. You see hundreds and hundreds of tribal organizations. Student bodies are all tribalized. You have Barghazali student, you have Equatorial student, you have Upper Nile student. So everything is tribalized. So there is no feeling of a nationhood. There is no citizenship in the country. So the spirit of nationalism is gone, because the vision of nationalism is no more. It's finished. It's gone. So a lot went wrong. And as I said earlier, until and unless a fundamental correction is carried out by literally replacing the current leadership, who is visionless, who has no idea about what should happen in the country, we will definitely continue to suffer in the South.
Samuel, what would you say about the big grand vision of SPLM that went wrong?
Yeah, the SPLA and SPLM vision should be first translated into kind of working strategy beyond rhetoric. And the first is at the beginning 2011, even the military and security situation and organization is very much decentralized and dispersed, and we have this warlord kind of structure and organization, and each group, they have their own military, they have their own soldiers. And the first step that you do in this kind of situation, if you want to guarantee liberty, human dignity, and the freedom of security of civilian, is to start reforming the military and security situation. You need to have a full package to introduce and then pave the way for security reform, for military reform, for police reform. Then you have to establish these institutions and an institutional structure. And apart from that, you need to talk about judiciary system that can ensure justice, and then from pre-trial, during trial, and post-trial institutions. The whole system should be transformed and then reformed in a way that ensures the aspiration of the people of South Sudan. And then you have this economic system where, this illicit economic system. Mostly in South Sudan, you have this gold, you have ivory, you have so many resources. The country is very, very, very rich. So you have to kind of to set up institutions that could, gradually take over the illicit economic system, and then you have to have an economy, and then start thinking about putting a strategy to establish institutions, public service, an institution which provide public service to the public. And then you have this, you need to think and then reform and have working strategy to establish infrastructure. Without infrastructure, without proper strategy to do so, it is very difficult. One thing, to manage all the resources properly from the resources that you are getting, for example, the oil money. And then it should be, you need to have an institution which can capable of managing those resources and distributing those resources, and then allocating some of the resources for the infrastructure which is necessary if you want to attract investment, if you want to facilitate the growth of economy in that country. And more importantly, the people have been involved in a conflict, and then after conflict, if you are not thinking about post-conflict stabilization and healing and truth telling and justice, then you cannot heal the wound of the people. You cannot, if you don't have a strategy to reconcile, as we discussed already, as Mr. Lamy already mentioned and described the situation during, in 1991, and then at the end of 1980s, and the conflict between different rivalries and conflict between different group, the group of Dr. Riek Machar and the group of Dr. John Garang, and the conflict, and it took tribal dimension, and it took ethnic dimension. You have this wound. You need to kind of have a mechanism to heal this wound and to bring people to kind of negotiate and discuss to pave the way and a collective way of thinking about their future, about their country, about their politics. So if you are not working in that regard, it is very difficult for as to me to achieve what they want to achieve. I mean, the vision of SPLA as laid out by this former leader, Dr. John Garang. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. It is now well established that the Horn of Africa region is volatile. South Sudan, as we all know, it is not stable. Ethiopia is going through some form of conflict in the northern part of the country. Eritrea has often been accused of dictatorship. Somalia has been in a fragile state for some time now. Ethiopia also with Sudan and Egypt are also having disagreement over the Nile water use. As South Sudan celebrates its independence today, and the fact that South Sudan is setting a precedence of instability in the region, does South Sudan, or what lesson does South Sudan teach the Horn of Africa region? Let me start with you.
Certainly, when somebody does something that is not good, then the only lesson that can be derived from that kind of entity is negative. South Sudan is a failed state. And as a failed state, certainly, if there are other parts of the region that want to learn from South Sudan, then they should be prepared to learn the wrong things. South Sudan has not been able to present an example of a success. In fact, as I said earlier, there are even South Sudanese themselves who now regret why they broke away from the North. Because if independence and liberation means it means this kind of problem that we have is what people expected to have as a result of independence, then many certainly will have every reason to regret, because South Sudan has not been able to give any good lesson to the region. And I think the Horn of Africa should be able to learn from the experience of South Sudan and try to avoid similar kinds of rhetorics and plan, because in the end, if they follow them, they will eventually end up in the same chaos like South Sudan. And even before South Sudan, we all know that in the 90s, it was Eritrea which first of all broke out of Ethiopia. From then up to now, Eritrea remains volatile. It remains a fragile state. And I am not sure if there are any good lessons that Africa as a continent or the Horn of Africa has learned from Ethiopia, from Eritrea. The South Sudan has only made it worse, because South Sudan literally collapsed. Particularly after independence, it collapsed. There is no unified system in the country. You may recall I said earlier that there are close to more than 25 rebel groups. That means you have 25 commanders in chief. You have 25 chiefs of staff. you have close to 4,000, 5,000 army generals, because these are all militias. Every militia in their village have the liberty to promote themselves. So this is anarchy. It's chaos. So who wants to learn this kind of things? I mean, if we are not able to organize even the very force that brought about the independence, that's the SPLA, like my brother Samuel referred to earlier. If we are not able to restructure and reform the SPLM, SPLA, and by this I mean actually the current government decided that they would prefer to recruit people of their own tribes from their own clans and groups. There is no national army today as I speak in South Sudan. The Salva Kiir went to Barghazal and recruited what he called Matenganyor. There are Matenganyors, there are Dutkubany, there are Galweng. All these are militia that are recruited in Barghazal. They are the ones now in the army. They are not different from Riek Machar, who has also recruited the Nuer, including the civilians, and they call them white army. There is no white army in the world. So you can see that everybody, and I could name a lot of people. Now, of reason, you have many other groups coming up. They are all, and if you look at closely at what they are saying and the kind of organizations they are developing, they are all tribally based, or at least regionally based. So there is nothing that is being done to create a nation state, you see, and so that people become one, so that people belong to a country and call themselves citizens. You don't even hear people talking about citizenship. You only hear about community. All the activities are defined by tribe and community and then clan. That is chaos. So if I were to be of any suggestion to the Horn of Africa, let our people know that the lessons that they take from South Sudan should serve to help them never to get into this kind of political quagmire. It is wrong. And anybody who wants to think along those lines in the Horn of Africa is perhaps either blind or they are not prepared to learn from all this crisis.
Well, Samuel, the Horn of Africa is a complex geopolitical region. As I've already stated, there is a big lesson to learn from South Sudan. What would you think that lesson could be?
I think it is not only confined to the situation of South Sudan, but all the the countries in, the Horn of Africa, they have been involved in tit-for-tat proxy war, supporting and arming one group over the other, involving. I mean, we all know that we have this. It is in public domain that the involvement of the Ugandan forces in South Sudan conflict, and then some of even the rebel forces from the Sudan in South Sudanese conflict, and we have also involvement of Eritrean forces in Ethiopian conflict, and the Somali forces in Ethiopian conflict, in the Ethiopian recent conflict. So you have these dynamics, and the countries should, they have tried for centuries this kind of kind of geopolitical strategy based on attacking your neighbor, and based on proxy war, based on supporting insurgency, then they have to. This is a dead end, and we only end up in a kind of displacement and loss, destruction, loss of life. Mass atrocities committed against civilians and the starvation, all this kind of chaos and days and destruction. So we need to rethink and then have some kind of a strategy outside this that can bring the region into stability and then a peaceful negotiated settlement, which paved the way for peaceful political transition and durable peace. Now, I think in most of the recently, most of the Western African countries, they were able to strengthen the sub-regional bodies and the institutions, and then support each other and stand against this kind of military-based overtake of power. So we have witnessed some kind of democratic transition in Ghana, democratic transition in Senegal, and more or less democratic transition in Gambia. And you have this positive trend. And if they are able to maintain the momentum to pave the way for stable democratic transition and a stable political environment, free political environment, where all people they bring their, all parties could bring their political agenda to the market, to the political market, to the public, and then secure mandate freely from the public. Unless we are thinking about that, and then all this negotiated solution should think about generally changing the geopolitical landscape in the Horn of Africa, from from the environment of standing against each other to the environment of collaboration and then win-win solution for the region. You cannot settle even the political difference of each in each state, because these political parties, the actors in conflict, they have support from external bodies immediately, and they don't have the motivation to stop and sit for negotiation. So you have to dry the source of the this kind of firepower, and then force these players, this actor, to sit for negotiation, and then try to resolve conflict as much as possible by addressing the root cause of the conflict and paving the way for stable and sustainable durable peace that could ensure lasting a kind of a political platform that could work for everybody.
Well, thank you, Samuel. As a final message or comment, let me give you a minute to say if there is anything that you would want to add. Lemmy, the floor is yours.
I thank you again, Mikhail. My message is that South Sudan has gone in the wrong way, and therefore it should not be presented as an example of any success. If anything, the people of South Sudan should begin to think of how they can be able to come out of this disastrous political setup. The region must learn the wrong things of South Sudan and try to avoid it so that we don't have a repeat of the same crises that are affecting South Sudan today to be exported to other countries. So there are a lot of lessons to learn, but my recommendation is that the lessons that we have from the experiences of South Sudan are not helpful, but they will help to guide the thinking of the people in the region to do everything in their capacity to avoid falling into the same trap like South Sudan. For the South Sudanese, they have no way, but they should be able to work hard and ensure that a new political arrangement takes place, a new political dispensation. I have heard my brother Samuel talking about reconciliation, about making agreements that are acceptable. For South Sudan, I think it is time for people to demand to have a contract with their government. Whoever wants to be their government should seek legitimacy from the people so that government, when in power, should become accountable also to the people. This is something that is missing at the moment because our current regime has not been elected. The only election that took place was when we were still one Sudan. So up to now, people of South Sudan have not been able to have the opportunity to decide. So there is no contract that exists between the people and the government. That contract has to be brought about. People have to work hard and ensure that there must be elections in the country so that we can see a new form of leadership to move us away from the circle of destruction and agony.
Samuel, your final
Yeah,
points.
already the protracted conflict in South Sudan, in Ethiopia, and in the Horn of Africa is a kind of tearing apart the social contracts that keep the people together. I'm afraid that if the political leaders are not willing and the general public are not pushing in the direction that all the conflicts should be, the actors should see it, and there must be inclusive dialogue to resolve the root cause of the conflict, and then pave the way for a new kind of social contract that could, create a platform for everybody's view to be expressed, and then people pave their future collectively. If they are not able to have this kind of political direction, then it is very difficult. I'm afraid it will rip each countries apart. At the end of the day, we might end up in a kind of statelessness, and then the whole Horn of Africa could be in a situation where no one could control and solve the instability and a kind of a siege that could be created, a siege where one stand against the other, and this siege of instability could result in further severe mass atrocities and then killing and destruction. So while we are celebrating South Sudanese liberation, one has to think about how the current protracted situation could be resolved peacefully. You have to own the comprehensive peace agreement now. If the, you have, it is to be true, and the actors should negotiate to address the root cause of instability in that country. It shouldn't be resonate only around power sharing scheme. If that is the case, then it is very difficult to kind of gradually build durable peace in that country. And I wish the actors by now would exhaustively look for a negotiated solution which could address the root cause of instability and conflict in South Sudan. The country is very rich with a lot of resources. You could, pave the way, a system of governance. If the Ghanaian are able to do that, why not South Sudan, and why not Ethiopia? Why not Eritrea? Then the Horn of Africa, just look other Africans who are able to ensure a peaceful political transition and gradually build a stable peace in their own country. Learn, benchmark the best practices, and then contextualize to your own situation and try to get out of this vicious cycle of violence and instability.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. And I think we are now concluding our program. So, viewers, I hope you have taken enough information from the discussion we had with my guest. So, for those South Sudanese who are celebrating, I wish you a very great Independence Day. Thank you, viewers, for your time. Thanks for my guest. On behalf of the Indigenous Media Network, so our programs is now coming to an end. So join us again for the next show on the Indigenous Media Network. Thank you.